Hello, welcome. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. And Happy Lunar New Year. My name is Ellegood. I am the Good Works Executive Director of ICALA, and we are so thrilled to be opening Scratching at the Moon and celebrating with all of you here today. You're going to hear a lot about the exhibition here in a minute, but I want to make a few thanks in advance of the panel discussion. Firstly, I want to acknowledge our incredible staff and board. This event today and the exhibition wouldn't have been possible without the work of all of our staff members who are here today, so please introduce yourselves, get to know them, and our incredible board who's so supportive of everything we do, and I'm so grateful for them. I want to make a special shout out to Caroline Ellen Liou, our Curatorial Associate, who worked very, very closely with Anna and I on the exhibition, as well as Amanda Sroka, our Senior Curator, who was there every step of the way as well and contributed to the catalog. And then Peter Gould, who's our exhibition designer and lead installer, and he just did an incredible job on this exhibition, as well as our registrar, Janae. I just want to say a few words about Anna Sue Hoy before we start. It has been just a total pleasure to work with Anna. As many of you know who know her, she's not only an incredible artist, she is an amazing friend to so many and a member of this community. And I think this exhibition is really coming from that place, coming from her network, knowing so many people over so many years, and her deep regard and respect for her peers and their practices, for her elders, as she would call them. And I just want to say that I'm so glad that she brought this idea to ICLA and that we've had a lot of fun working together over the last couple of years. So congratulations, huge congratulations to Anna. Two of the catalog contributors are with us today, John Tain, who is part of the panel, and Chris Kuramitsu, who is somewhere in the audience. I also want to acknowledge Sarah Wang, who is not with us here today, but will be coming out during the run of the exhibition and giving a tour of the exhibition. So whenever we announce a date for that, please come to that. I think it'll be really special. We have created an incredible catalog. The designer and co-publisher is here with us. Dorothy Perret, where are you? Over here. She's a brilliant, brilliant designer. I don't know if is Barlow here? Our editor, who we also love, Barlow. Is Barlow here? Anyway, I don't know. People are raising their hands. Where is he?
No, he's not.
He's not here. Anyway, Dorothy has been a real partner in this and has had long, long conversations with Anna over many, many months. And the book will be here in April. We cannot wait. We are waiting to send it to the printer because we're taking exhibition installation views on Monday, and we're putting them in the book and we're sending it off to the printer. So stay tuned for that. I also want to acknowledge our bookshelf residency, which is very special. A couple times a year, we invite booksellers, bookshops, publishers to be in residency on our bookshelves, and that's run by Oscar Hisa, our Director of Learning and Engagement. And in the spirit of the exhibition, we have invited Uga Buga and Wendy Yao, Amy's sister, to be on our bookshelves. And you can see that it's an incredible array of publications, zines, amazing products. I think all the staff are worried that we're going to spend way too much money in this little shop that we have going here. In addition to that, there will be 3 rotations of exhibitions in our small annex space for designers and publishers that that Wendy works with. And right now, we have Lauren Graycar of Kima presenting 10 years of her work. So please check that out. I want to acknowledge our funders. This has been a show that has really garnered a lot of desire to support it, and we're so grateful to all of those people. First and foremost, the Fellows of Contemporary Art, FOCA, came in with a very generous grant extremely early in the process, and we are so grateful to them. They really kick-started the curatorial process, made us feel like we could get enough support to do this show in the way that we wanted to be able to publish a catalog alongside it. And so I want to acknowledge a few of the people. Many people from FOCA are here today, so raise your hands if you want. You guys are awesome. We love you. I do want to name Noriko Fujinami, who is the chair when the award, there she is, Noriko. Paul Weisselman, who's in the back, who was the curator's award chair when we got the award, and Lucy Sun. So thank you all so much. The show is also supported by the Andy Warhol Foundation. It always feels great to get funding from Andy Warhol, artists supporting artists in some way through time and space. It's also supported by Tim Disney, Kathleen, Kim, Eric Kim, Jack and Deborah Irmas of the Audrey and Sydney Irmas Charitable Foundation, the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Henry Moore Foundation in London that supported Michelle Lopez's commissioned sculpture. We also created what we called the Friends of Scratching at the Moon, a group fund, and I want to name those who contributed to that. And it's been a real pleasure in the course of fundraising for this exhibition to meet a lot of new people and to feel like we have some new friends of ICLA in that process. So Annie Chu, Noriko also gave to that fund, Shue and Paul Her-Sturm, Julia Huang, Marilyn Long, Grace O and John Chan, Susan Song, Celia Yang, and Christopher Yin and John Yoon. Thank you all so much. And lastly, I want to make a special shout out to Harlan Steinberger of Hen House Studios, who contributed a lot of time and labor and space to the recording of Simon Lung's opera with his composer and all his musicians. So thank you, Harlan. I think he may be here. He's on his way. As you know, there are bios of all these wonderful people on your chairs, so we're not going to do spoken biographies to save ourselves some time. And just a little bit about the format. I'm going to ask each person one question. Anna's going to get two. And then I'm hoping that there may be some questions in and among the artists and John to talk among ourselves, and then we'll open it up to the audience for a couple of questions there at the end. So thank you for being here. Anna's going to get tired of me asking her this question, but it's a really important one. Anna, can you talk about the genesis of the exhibition, where it came from, and really how it came about?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Yes, Anna, I can answer that. And I wrote something down this morning because I wanted to tell it right, and I didn't want to miss anything. So I'm going to try to speak my notes and also speak to you at the same time. But I've lived in LA for most of my life, since I was 3 to be exact. And LA is my city, and I'm surrounded by friends and family who also have crossed oceans and deserts and mountains to get here and make a life here. But as a child of the 80s, I understood when I was small that I should assimilate, fit in, and succeed on other people's terms. But the year 2020 was a stark year for all of us, and where our idea of daily life was turned upside down. And civic and health systems, which were supposed to be a safety net, proved to have a bunch of holes. People were getting sick and dying, and fear of COVID led to an uptick in racialized violence against Asians. And in that moment, I witnessed how many of us came together in mutual support by any means necessary, from Zoom meetings to protests in the street. And we also fought back by participating in uprisings in support of Black lives. I began to meet with other local Asian art workers online to process the anti-Asian hate together. And we also talked a lot about how unseen we often felt by the art world in general. We banded together as the AAPI Arts Network to support one another's shows, research, and events. And the first public event we did was a series of 2 panel discussions honoring the work of Karen Higa, who was a curator and art historian who championed many underrepresented and forgotten artists during her career from the 90s to the aughts. we remembered the Asian Arts Collective of the 90s called Godzilla, who came together in New York and famously wrote a letter to the director of the Whitney Museum asking why there were so few Asian Americans represented in the Whitney Biennial. And both Higa's collective writings and a book of Godzilla's work, which was edited by Howie Chen, are available at this Ooga Booga store, and they're amazing, brilliant books. But Karen Higa gave me my very first institutional shows at the Asia Society in New York and at the Japanese American Museum in Little Tokyo in 2006 and 2007. And I also remembered how Simon Lung and Bruce Yanomoto gave me my first teaching jobs, and they have spent, as well as Young-Soon Min, decades bringing up generations of young artists in their work at UC Irvine. I've been collaborating with the Yao sisters, Amy and Wendy, for years, and with Michelle. And I also remembered Young Chung, who has dedicated their entire gallery to uplifting queer artists of color and their allies. And in partnership with Kibum Kim, they have grown this gallery called Commonwealth and Council into a leading art space recognized in LA, New York, and internationally. And I realized that I've benefited from a very valuable network of beloved artists my whole life in art, and this network should be highlighted and celebrated and not remain unnoticed and taken for granted. And I will just finish by saying that the amazing thing about this show is that as soon as I began sharing the idea for it, it has been embraced by many, as Anne has already said. And when I started talking about why Scratching at the Moon should exist from 2020 to now, people have really stepped in to make it happen. And I'm also really grateful to Patty Chang for asking me to imagine where, in my wildest dreams, would I wish for this show to be. And I'm really grateful for Patty for her to ask me that question, and I'm really grateful for Anne Ellegood to say, yes, you can do it here. I'm grateful to Foka. I'm grateful to Dorothy for talking to me, conceptualizing the catalog from many years ago, Warhol Foundation, and all of the individual friends who have supported, and many who I've been talking to very frequently since we started the AAPI Arts Network. And so I just want to say this show has been made by us, and it's dedicated to us, and the invisible network has come to light. Woo!
Thank you, Anna. John, in your essay for the catalog, titled Pacific Contemporaries, Asian American Art Exhibitions in Los Angeles, you map out in great detail the history of representation of Asian and Asian American artists in museums in Los Angeles since the 1980s, with a particular focus on major museums that are dedicated to presenting contemporary art. In particular, LACMA, MoCA, The Hammer, and ICLA, or formerly the Santa Monica Museum of Art. We could spend all afternoon going through John's incredible essay, and I encourage you all, when the book comes out, to read it. But could you give us a general overview of what you found in your research and your writing?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I want to congratulate both Anna and you on this and the artists on this amazing exhibition. So yeah. And I think when Anna mentioned this as a possibility, and asked if I would contribute an essay for it, we were talking about the way that there was a very first-person reasoning behind the selection of artists, and then going with that, I originally was thinking about, okay, well, I also grew up in LA. I'm not born here, but I grew up here, and working with my recollections and memories and my impressions of having grown up here, what the art scene was like, what LA was like, and that had actually been my original intention, was writing something a little more kind of first person. But in the process of doing some of the research for the exhibition, like as a way of kind of jogging my memory, I came to realize that I grew up here with MoCA as kind of like a reference institution for what contemporary art was, and also LACMA. The Anderson building opened around the same time that MoCA opened in the 80s. And that, between the two institutions, there was not necessarily a very kind of strong representation of Asian American artists in either institution. And, I think for those of us who were here, we remember like Namjoon Paik, like the installation being there, and that was kind of like a key kind of piece for LACMA's collection. That was kind of about it. And then Isazaki's building for MoCA. And in the process of doing the research, I came to realize that, the Asian representation that there was like basically Japanese artists who were shown at both institutions until 93, 94, which is when MoCA started having a few shows of artists of color. And this wasn't necessarily just Asian American artists who were not being shown. It was kind of general, except for Betty Saar, for instance, there was no artists of color who had an exhibition at MoCA until 93. And I think that there was a very symbolic and kind of very obvious reason why that all of a sudden switched, the switch flipped because of what happened in 92 with the LA riots, And so I think people started taking that into account and thinking about why race was such an issue here. And so, it was really kind of not necessarily something I knew before I wrote the essay, but only in the process. And we had the conversation about this, how this exhibition is the first group exhibition of Asian American artists at one of LA's major art institutions, which is kind of really, like such kind of, in some ways, it doesn't seem like it would be the case. And why that is the case is something that we can discuss further, but I think that was something which, wasn't verbalized anywhere. And I think to find it like to be the case after having combed through like newspapers and reviews and, like various sites looking for what exhibitions there were, was something that if it matched my memory, but not quite specifically in that pointed a detail or that way. And I think it accords with, I think, what Anna was saying earlier about growing up and wanting to assimilate and fit in and kind of succeed on other people's terms. And I think that, diasporic Asian and Asian American people in the US growing up at a certain point in time, I think were very kind of complacent about, okay, well, the art world is the way it is, or the society is the way it is. But I think that what's been great about what's been happening in the last few years is that there's been a much more conscious awareness that that situation, if we want things to change, we have to really make things change, and not letting kind of well, things will happen when they happen. And I think we're seeing that within the larger kind of art world. With the much greater visibility being given to Asian American and Asian artists. I think now we have at the Hammer we have a show of artists from Korea, for instance, and understanding that there's been very strong limitations to that representation and to that inclusion is something that was pretty basic, I guess. But I think whereas people have been very vocal about it from other communities of color, I think Asian Americans hadn't been, and I think this is something that probably should change.
Hear, hear. Michelle. So, Michelle, you are the only artist in the exhibition who actually is not from LA and has never lived in LA, but we felt that you have very strong ties to the city. You show with Commonwealth and Council now, but also you had 2 early exhibitions in your career here that I think were probably very important for you and your thinking about your work and also visibility in this community. And I know that you are very close to a lot of artists in LA, including Anna, of course, and others in the exhibition. So In 1999, you had, I love this title, the Untitled Thumb and Drape Project, which you're going to have to unpack for us, at LACE, Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions. And then in 2008, you had an exhibition at LAX Art called The Year We Made Contact. And you happened to, in that instance, show in one gallery while Vishal Jigdeo, who's also in the exhibition, showed in the other gallery, and you became friends. So I just thought it would be fun for you to reflect back on those two early shows here in LA. And, you know, what were they? What did it mean to you to show in Los Angeles at that time and among the community here? And also, if you don't mind adding on, to then speak a little bit about correctional lighting, which is the newly commissioned piece that you see looming over in front of you with the street lamp and rotating around the gallery. So it's a multi-part question for you.
Okay, I hope I can get that in to 10 minutes and not bore you guys. So yeah, in '99, Irene Satsos asked me to do a project at LACE, and so I did spend 3 months in LA and actually developed a real love affair of LA and just really took to it because it's a sculptor's town, let's face it. It's a great place to make sculpture, and it's a great place to be inspired about just the landscape. And so in that show, I found a car in the valley and covered it entirely in skin-colored leather. And so for me, my work has always been about how to think about embodiment, bodies, but maybe in terms of a diffuse form of figuration. And also, just as a sculptor, just my relationship in my body to space and things around me, and yeah, just what is my experience in my body and how that's changed over time. And I think my work reflects that. And yeah, responding to different situations and different environments. And so for that piece, it was really in relationship to like grappling with a cultural signifier and really through a material shift by covering it in leather, like the car as a kind of receptacle of desire and as a means of how we project our desires and how it's also fetishized in all these ways. And so I took a Honda 600 from 1971, which is kind of the year after my birth, and covered in leather to make it, to transform it and kind of destabilize those signifiers and make it the sexy thing in a way. And with the 2008 show that I did at LAX Art with Vish, Vish was in the other room, but I had actually, just to get a little personal, I had, Star Wars had just come, like the Star Wars, what was it? They were coming out with a lot more Star Wars. And a lot of my work has been about trying to deconstruct these cultural signifiers and thinking about the Star Wars mythology as this real construct of between good and evil, and I wanted to break that down a little bit. I had just had a child, and so this has nothing to do with Star Wars, but it has more to do with this, again, a bodily thing of this real, just, you get torn apart when you have a child. And I was really interested in this relationship between internal and external systems, not in relationship to having a child, but just thinking a lot about failure. 2001, I was living in New York. The collapse of the Twin Towers was a huge thing in my practice, and I was responding to that in terms of a kind of debris. So the work in this LAX art show was starting to be about broken bodies and broken systems, and I was working with a prosthetic company to make a Death Star, because a Death Star is actually a prosthetic star, and have it be a body in a way, and one that opens up into this landscape that's made out of prosthetic plastic, and one of the other pieces was this throwaway used prophylactic that was morphing into the head of a C-3PO. And that sounds so, I don't know what I was thinking, but I was thinking about, I knew what I was thinking, which was I wanted to make a trophy, but thinking in terms of me as a female sculptor, a trophy cast out of bronze, but instead of it being celebrated, it would be this throwaway trophy, prophylactic, that was morphed into a C-3PO. So it was really just kind of questioning these notions that I was thinking of what was a kind of macho, masculine way of thinking, and really just questioning kind of iconography, or questioning really for me what sculpture meant and how to really use it and manipulate it in ways that responded to what was, for me at the time, already real political and global systems that were being questioned. And so this piece, and like Anna was saying, then 2020 happened. I mean, 2016 happened, and then 2020 happened, and so it's like these series of global events where I think artists are wondering how to find agency, but also how to really respond to what's happening in our environment. I think for me, some of the things that I've also been thinking about that Anna touched upon was this feeling of invisibility, and also looking at institutional forms of power, and the way that they kind of are breaking bodies in a way. And so I kind of like how I can see the piece from here and see the shadows. But so that's this institutional highway lamp that I worked with. I teach at University of Pennsylvania, so I worked with engineering students to help me figure out how to basically create a mobile. The lamp is actually cast out of cast iron, because I wanted it to be this kind of lead weight that's this plumb bob that's just kind of hanging down as if it's like this, the weight of what's going on right now, and how the light acts as this surveillance that's kind of creating this, not really an infinite loop, but this kind of claustrophobia of this closed system, really, in terms of thinking about power and the way it shuts things down. And originally the piece is like, I wanted it to be cast out of glass, because I've been working with this idea of chandeliers and glass. And also, I grew up in the South, and Patty Chang actually introduced us to this text during the pandemic by Juliet Singh called No Archive Will Save You, Will Restore You. And it talks about the infinite historical traces. And so I've been interested in kind of the same way I've been interested in breaking down iconography. I've been interested in the historical traces of just the way that landscape can kind of hold trauma, the way that us as a community holds trauma, and how it's being exposed and released now, as we're willing to have courage to shine a light on it. And so originally that piece I wanted to cast at a glass, so that there would be this tension of it falling. And but it's really, for me, I've always been thinking about how I can illuminate the kind of invisible, embodied person who's not seen. I talk about growing up in the South because for a long time I was interested in the South feels very haunted to me, and I was interested in a long time in lynching trees and the ways that there are bodies present everywhere, and I'm always interested in the histories that surround us whenever I traverse through a landscape. And so the thing of this correctional lighting, just being able to cast a really big shadow on this mundane kind of cinder block and create this larger-than-life thing was something that was interesting for me.
Thank
so,
you.
yeah,
That's
I
amazing.
hope that makes sense.
Yes. Thank you, Michelle. Amy. So Amy is now living part-time in New York, but was born in LA and has a home here. And in fact, many of your works explore understandings of cultural identity of and by Asian Americans in Southern California specifically, with works such as the outdoor piece that you all saw, hopefully, when you walked in, if there's not too many things blocking it right now, which is called Foreign Investments, Botarga in Costa Mesa. And this piece specifically calls out Orange County, where the population is 21.1% Asian. And that's the largest ethnic group, after Caucasians. So I thought you could talk about this work and the restaging of this work here at ICLA and the ideas that you're exploring in terms of symbols of Asian identity or your understandings of Asianness, questions of access and boundaries created to isolate or keep out communities, and notions of authenticity.
Thank you. Hi. So let me think about that. Well, there's a lot to say. I guess I would say that, yes, I did grow up here. I was born here and have been trying to spend more and more time here as much as I can. I live part-time in Topanga, but my job brings me to the East Coast, and I also went to graduate school there. I think this mic is falling down. But yeah, I guess Asianness or being Asian has been kind of in the constellation of things that I've thought about since I was rather young. And I guess I was a part of the punk scene in the early 1990s, which I was introduced to Riot Girl, which is like a kind of feminist punk movement. And that was sort of important to me at the time because we would have these meetings where no men were allowed, and only women would gather, and then we would kind of talk, and it would get very emotional, and people would cry, and it was very intense. But and then a lot of guys in my high school they were angry, they were like, you're sexist, or you're what is it called, it's whatever, man-hater kind of thing. And but I think it was kind of an important moment for me to learn something about having that kind of space, where you could be intimate with people who had some kind of affinity with, and that you could then learn things about yourself through that experience of kind of brutal honesty. And at that time, my sister was part of that group as well, who does the Ooga Booga. And also, that's where we met my friend Emily Ryan, who's a Vietnamese American friend from Orange County. And we formed this band, Emily Sassy Lime, which we had all these like fantasies of an Asian invasion, which never really happened. But we were very like obsessed with this idea, and we talked about it all the time. Like when we would tour America, like we play like the Midwest or like the South, and we'd be like, "Are you ready for the Asian invasion?" We like tell the audience members that, even though there was like no Asians there, clearly. But I don't know if people thought we were crazy or what. But you know, like it was like kind of like also like it gave us like a moment to think about like other Asians that we. You know, like I guess John, you were saying like, you know, like there weren't that many shows with Asians in it, and I think that's true, but it doesn't mean that there weren't Asians around doing things. Like clearly there were like lots of Asians doing things. You know, we met the giant robot guys they were at UCLA at that time, like they were students, and became friends with them. There was John Moritsugu, who's like a Japanese-American filmmaker from Hawaii who lived in San Francisco. V. Vale, who was like one of the early punk musicians. I'm kind of really going off topic here, but I'll come back around. But V. Vale like is, you know, from the Bay Area, was like one of the most important publishers of punk music, like related archives, like from magazines, Search and Destroy, to Research magazine, to then also like doing stuff with Target Video, whatnot. So there were all these like people who were doing things, although we did realize most of them were male that we were familiar with, which was kind of a little weird. But still we became friends with them, and like we were trying to like kind of amplify, you know, by like distributing flyers at our shows with information about like Giant Robot, like you could subscription things and whatever at the time. But yeah, so I mean, it's always sort of been something that's been important to me, to be politically engaged as part of my art practice. And it took me a long time, I think, to like through school and then coming out of school and working and doing random jobs, to then like going back to school, and then like that whole thing was very crazy because I went to the East Coast, to then eventually like figuring out how to sort of like make this work that spoke to me and felt very like engaged in a like more grounded way to myself. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyways. So yeah, I guess at the time that I made the rice pile, which I was also then, it was very close to the time that I made the fence piece outside, which some of you maybe didn't notice it because it does look kind of pretty realistic to a construction site fencing situation. Like I was living in Long Beach, California, and my studio was in Commerce, so I was commuting along this this road, the 710, the freeway, which basically I was like surrounded by trucks all the time, and my studio was between two different railroad yards. So basically the trucks would end up there, and then they would like jack up the cargo and put it on the train, and then it would take off. But I got lost a few times in the port, spent a lot of time there. And like, you know, I don't know, I guess I would say that I like spent a lot of time thinking about the forms that I was seeing at the time, and that like, you know, so many of the cargo ships are coming from Asia, because, you know, this is like the largest port in North America that's facing the Pacific also. And then just thinking about like, I guess also like gentrification battles that were happening at the time were very intense. And I was kind of like amazed about it because there was some parts of it that like I feel like in the early 90s people were always talking about these things, but I felt like now there's like this kind of new activism related to it. But sometimes, I don't know, it's interesting because I guess I would say like, you know, in New York, for instance, like a lot of people complain about like mainland Chinese people coming into Chinatown and buying real estate. And a lot of these are like maybe like middle to upper middle class mainland Chinese people coming in. And then I was thinking about like tourists who stop me, because my studio in New York used to be in Chinatown, who would stop me in the road, be like, where are the gates, the dragon gates? And like, you know, like this kind of like image of Chinatown, and then like lots of tchotchkes being sold. And just like this kind of like, I don't know, just thinking about all those things, like, and then like, you know, led me to sort of make this work. Because also, I guess, Costa Mesa specifically, and like kind of near Costa Mesa, also has like more and more Asians moving in there as well. And so I kind of started thinking about like ideas of gatekeeping and borders a lot. Mind you, also like Trump is also president coming up soon, and then he's also like invoking all this rhetoric about like build the wall, all these things. And so I don't know, like in a very long-winded way here, I guess I'll just say that yeah, all of those things are things that I think about quite a lot. You know, like same with the piece that's got the pipes on the wall that you see clams on there. I worked with a invasive species, a few different invasive species scientists to make that work, where they collected these Asian clams that are like quasi-invasive species, but it's like kind of unclear whether they are or not. But they clearly like came here, like nobody really knows how they came, but they've been here for a long time in the US and also other parts of the Americas, and they're like seen as being like great by certain people, like I found all these like Cambodian recordings on YouTube where they were like saying like, it's amazing, like in Arizona you can find these clams, and like, you know, they're like digging for it, like we come here every Sunday and we go clamming. But then, you know, they're also like known to clog power intake valves and things like that. So anyways, there's also this like racialization oftentimes with natural species, you know, like not only just the Asian clam, but also like the African bee and so on and so forth. And the Asian virus or China virus, whatever. So I guess, yeah, so basically,
Thank you, Amy. I think
yeah,
that's great.
that sounds,
Thank you
yeah,
so much.
kind of long-winded, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question for Anna. And then we'll open it up briefly to all of you. But Anna, I wanted you to talk a little bit about the multitude wall, which is the piece made of collars from men's work shirts that we won't go into a lot of detail about the work. Everyone can see it, and some of you already have. But one of the things I really came to understand in working with Anna, I think we both sort of came to understand about that piece, is that beyond a lot of meanings that it holds in her mind and in the making of the work, we started to see it a bit as a metaphor for the exhibition in its web-like structure and the way that it creates a kind of network of interconnectivity among you know, the objects in the piece. So I wondered if there's also a way in which the porousness of the work reflects how Anna and I chose to install the exhibition. It was really important to us. While some of the works, especially video, really do require their own room, we wanted there to be multiple artists or more than one artist in most of the galleries, and we really opened up the space as you walk in so that there is a dialogue and a relationship among the artists. That's always really the beauty of a group exhibition, is to start to think about those relationships. So I wondered if you would talk about multitude wall and, you know, moreover, maybe more importantly, you're thinking about this network that you're mapping in the exhibition, and any thoughts about the installation itself you want to share.
Yes, and I will do it briefly, but I love looking at Amy's doppelgangers, the pile of rice, through the shirt web. And I love stepping on the white carpet, which you will do soon. That is part of Amy's piece, to look at my growing ruin sculptures. And I would just say that we in this show have been making work side by side and nearby each other for a very long time. And that adjacency is, can be experienced and is reflected in the galleries. Michelle's light piece illuminates Bruce's globes and Patty's snapshots. And the row of red carnations by Bruce and Norman on one wall are echoed by Dean Samashima's photographs, the row of jewel tone photographs by Dean on the other wall. There's also a beautiful gallery that has work by Yang Soon Min and Young Chung, which really honors their very close relationship. Young Chung took Young Soon's Issues in Autobiography course at UC Irvine in the 1990s, where students were urged to center their own lives and stories in their work, especially if their stories were apart from mainstream culture. And Young and Young Soon have stayed close ever since. And also, you'll hear how there's a lot of sound that spills out of the video rooms and into the galleries. So there is a lot of enmeshing in space, and that should, that kind of illustrates how enmeshed we kind of are and entangled we are in our relationships and interdependent we are. And I think we really worked hard to select the work very carefully and specifically, so each work has a real weight. There's no lightweights here. Everybody is like research-based, been making work for a very long time, and each work can stand alone, but we wanted to give each work its own space, but also kind of in a meaningful way connect with the others around it. And you'll walk, as you're walking through, you'll see how there's overlapping themes in the work that kind of questioning identity, fear around climate disaster, remembering and channeling our mentors and our ancestors, and also subverting cultural icons. And I hope, yeah, you'll see soon. But, thank you.
So since we started a little late, we're going to run a little bit over the hour, but I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know people are eager to get into the galleries. But I wanted to open it up to the panelists and the audience if anyone has a question for anyone up here. Do you have questions for each other? Does anyone out there have a question you want to pose? Okay, John.
So I'll just project. I want to just come back to the beginning where I was really curious, John and Tain, you were describing the sort of way you began to do the sort of writing that you were doing in a very first-person way, but then it became this kind of research that you discovered that the criticality of the show, with the context of the overall. Here we go. Thank you. Thanks, Aska. I just think it's amazing the narrative that you're describing, starting in the first person maybe, and then kind of it became this research thing. And what you discover, being that this is one of the first, truly Asian American shows in an institution. So congrats, ICA, yes, awesome stuff. I was just really curious, John, what was the first person feeling as this material started to emerge for you?
Thanks. Thanks for that question. I guess, one of the essay wasn't necessarily like, in the direction that it was going, it wasn't necessarily like a surprise per se, but I guess what it did was it helped put everything kind of very concretely and laid things out in a way that I had never seen verbalized or kind of like written out in that way. And so I guess what became the central question for the essay was, how did the fact that LA, Southern California, went from being a place that had always been understood as being a center for Asian American life, since the 19th century. But it went from a place that was like maybe like at most 3% Asian to a place that was over 10, sometimes 20% Asian, right? In like a span of a decade from the 70s into the 80s. How did that like not have an impact in the art that was being seen at the museums in the region, right? Because it had an impact on every other aspect of life. It had an impact on real estate. It had an impact on our dining culture. Like Jonathan Gold like made his like career like documenting SGV for all of us, right?
Yeah.
In this really kind of like clear way. And yet somehow, and I think Amy is right, there were things happening. They were just not happening in the museum. And so why was that, like, and how was that manifesting itself? So I think that, and especially because LA was supposed to be the gateway for the US into the Pacific Rim, this notion of like the US being part of this larger Pacific Rim that we were all part of. And yet, why was it that, it was like such an absence within the institutions? And, so that was part of like the question, the puzzle, I guess. Like, how did this like demographic shift, like this really big demographic shift, how did that not manifest? And in what ways did that not manifest? I think that was the kind of, and understanding that and kind of like in some ways like confirming a feeling that I always had, growing up and just being able to like lay it out there, I think. And that was also a way of contextualizing, because I think it was like, without necessarily knowing what work was going to be in the show while I was working on the essay, but like trying to find some way to like contextualize the project and thinking about the significance and importance of this as a project. I think that was part of what I was hoping to contribute. So.
Thank you. I just wonder how you see this show in relationship to a lot of the work that's been done in this space, particularly in more community-based organizations. And what does this sort of, if this show is a milestone, how does it relate to the work that's been done before?
Sorry, Oscar was talking to me and I missed the first part of your sentence. Well, I mean, as John elucidated in his essay, I mean, this show has certainly not been done anywhere, including at ICLA. I think, and you'll see this in Chris Kuramitsu's show. I mean, one thing I really love about ICA is I feel like we sort of orient both toward the larger museums and consider ourselves a museum showing contemporary art at the same sort of level as the larger institutions, and then we also orient ourselves very much to the smaller organizations like LACE and LAX Art and others. And I think when you trace those histories, as Chris does in her essay, including artist-run spaces, artist-founded spaces, you see that representation is much better across the board for artists of color and women artists in those spaces. And I think that ICA does have a strong history of that. And yet, I think arguably no institution has really risen to meet the need for representation for maybe Asian Americans specifically, not that there aren't other groups that could be called out there, especially within the context that John was also describing, a city that has an incredible Asian American community and a growing Asian American community across LA County and also all of Southern California. So yes, there is a history of certain shows and certain artists being presented here, but I think not enough.
Yeah, and maybe just to kind of expand on that. I mean, there was definitely an exhibition history of Asian American shows, like individual artists, but also group shows that were done at smaller institutions, university museums and galleries, and other kinds of spaces. So that work is there, and like the research, I laid out some of that as well. But I think it's just like part of the problematic for me was like, but why not the museum? Why couldn't the museum acknowledge that or somehow like kind of give voice to that in a kind of, or give space to that, And so that's kind of like, without necessarily overlooking what had been done, kind of thinking about like what remains to be done, I think.
Amy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I guess I would say that, like, you know, I don't know if I'm interpreting the question correctly, but I guess I would say that, like, you know, like one can only hope for greater continuity as there is more visibility, because I think what happens a lot is that generationally, like, the chains get broken. And so people don't know, like, about, you know, it takes a lot of effort to research this stuff. And, like, you know, I do know I have a friend who's Vietnamese American who has a website, I think it's called 1720 Women, where she's done a great deal of her own personal research for her own, like, fanzine type internet zine situation. But I think that, like, in, like, you know, because so much work has been done and undocumented, I think actually, like, very undocumented, and then, like, suddenly people decide, oh, we want to give some visibility to this person who died already, then, you know, you have all these, like, chains that are broken between generations, and one can only hope that in the future those will be more interconnected, and, you know, there's more dialogue generationally, intergenerationally.
Thank you. Okay, I think we'll end there because everyone, let's celebrate. Let's have a drink. One announcement. Artists in the exhibition, please meet us in front of the title wall. We're going to take some pictures. Thank you all.